Have you ever wondered why some couples seem to have this unspoken understanding about pleasure, this deep connection that goes beyond just physical touch? What if I told you there's a form of intimacy that most people practice privately, but rarely discuss openly, yet it could be the missing piece in your relationship that transforms not just your physical connection, but your emotional bond as well? What if the very thing you've been doing alone could become the bridge to deeper trust, better communication, and satisfaction levels you never thought possible with your partner? Stay with me, because what you're about to discover might completely change how you think about intimacy, vulnerability, and what it really means to know your partner on a level that most couples never reach. Let's talk about something that happens in millions of bedrooms around the world, but somehow remains wrapped in unnecessary shame and silence. Mutual self-pleasure between partners. The act of pleasuring yourself in the presence of your partner, or watching them do the same, sounds simple, perhaps even obvious, yet for most people, it remains an unexplored territory in their intimate lives. We live in a world where we're bombarded with images of sexuality everywhere we look, in movies, advertisements, music, and social media. Yet when it comes to the reality of what happens between two people who love each other, we still struggle to have honest conversations about what actually brings pleasure, what creates connection, and what deepens the bond that holds relationships together through years and decades. The research on this topic tells us something fascinating, something that contradicts what many people believe about intimacy and satisfaction. When couples incorporate mutual self-pleasure into their intimate experiences, they report significantly higher levels of satisfaction across the board, not just in the moment, but in their overall relationship quality. This isn't just about physical pleasure, though that certainly plays a role. It's about the layers of trust, vulnerability, and communication that makes such an experience possible in the first place. Think about it for a moment. To be comfortable enough to pleasure yourself in front of another person, even someone you love deeply, requires a level of acceptance and security that many relationships never achieve. It means being seen completely, without filters, without performance anxiety, without the masks we so often wear, even with the people closest to us. Studies examining partnered sexual behavior have found that among adults between the ages of 25 and 49, mutual self-pleasure is far more common than most people realize. In research involving more than 260 participants, nearly half of men and more than half of women reported engaging in this form of shared intimacy within just the previous 2 weeks. Let that sink in for a moment. This isn't some rare or unusual practice. It's something that a significant portion of coupled individuals are already doing, yet we almost never talk about it openly. The silence around this topic creates an unnecessary sense of abnormality, when in reality, it's a natural extension of sexual exploration within a committed relationship. What makes this form of intimacy particularly powerful is the educational component that comes with it. When you watch your partner pleasure themselves, you're not just a passive observer. You're learning, gathering information that no amount of verbal communication could fully convey. You see their rhythm, their pressure, their preferences in real time. You observe what makes them gasp, what makes them relax, what builds tension, and what releases it. This visual and emotional education translates directly into better partnered experiences because you now have a roadmap that you didn't have before. You understand Not just what your partner enjoys, but how they enjoy it, the specific ways they touch themselves that bring them the most pleasure. This knowledge becomes incredibly valuable in addressing one of the most persistent challenges in heterosexual relationships, the orgasm gap. Research has consistently shown that during penetrative intercourse alone, women climax significantly less frequently than men. This gap has been documented across numerous studies and cultures, creating frustration and sometimes resentment in relationships where both partners want satisfaction but struggle to achieve it consistently. However, when couples incorporate mutual self-pleasure into their intimate repertoire, this gap nearly disappears. The reason is straightforward. Most women require clitoral stimulation to reach orgasm, and this stimulation is often more effectively provided through self-touch than through intercourse alone. When this becomes a natural, accepted part of partnered intimacy, both partners experience more frequent and intense pleasure, leading to greater overall satisfaction. Beyond the physical mechanics, there's a profound emotional dimension to this form of sharing. Being witnessed in such a vulnerable state, being accepted and desired while you're focused entirely on your own pleasure, creates a sense of safety that extends far beyond the bedroom. It communicates several powerful messages simultaneously. It says, "I trust you to see me as I truly am." It says, "Your pleasure matters to me, and I want to understand it fully." It says, "We can explore together without judgment or shame." These messages, delivered through action rather than words alone, build a foundation of emotional intimacy that strengthens the relationship in countless ways. The research also reveals something interesting about initial reactions versus long-term experiences. Among the participants in these studies, only about 12 individuals reported feeling awkward or strange about mutual self-pleasure when they first tried it. That's a remarkably small number, considering we're talking about an act that our culture often treats as inherently private or even shameful. The vast majority of participants described the experience as positive, comfortable, and satisfying from the start. Even more tellingly, when asked about how this practice affected their relationships over time, participants consistently reported increased connection, curiosity about each other's bodies and preferences, and deeper overall intimacy. The awkwardness that some feared never materialized, or if it did, it quickly gave way to comfort and enjoyment as couples realized this was simply another way of being close, another form of sharing themselves with someone they love. What makes this finding particularly significant is that when researchers controlled for other variables like age, relationship length, and frequency of other sexual activities, couples who had practiced mutual self-pleasure recently still reported significantly higher sexual satisfaction than those who hadn't. This means the benefit wasn't just because these were couples who were having more sex generally, or because they were in newer relationships with higher baseline passion. The specific act of sharing self-pleasure created a measurable improvement in satisfaction that couldn't be explained by other factors. Something about this particular form of intimacy was uniquely valuable in creating fulfillment within the relationship. We need to think about what this really means in practical terms for real couples navigating the complexities of long-term relationships. In the early stages of romance, when everything is new and exciting, couples often experience intense physical chemistry without much effort. The novelty itself creates arousal and satisfaction, But as relationships mature, as life gets busier with careers and children and responsibilities, maintaining that sense of excitement and connection requires more intentionality. Couples need to actively create variety in their intimate lives, finding new ways to surprise each other, to learn about each other, to keep the sense of discovery alive even after years or decades together. Mutual self-pleasure offers exactly this kind of opportunity for continued exploration and growth. It's not something you do once and then check off a list. It's an ongoing practice that can evolve and deepen over time, revealing new layers of preference and pleasure as both partners change and grow. The concept of sexual repertoire becomes crucial here. Researchers use this term to describe the range of activities and experiences that couples incorporate into their intimate lives. Studies consistently show that couples with a broader sexual repertoire report higher arousal levels, stronger satisfaction, and better communication overall, compared to couples who stick to a narrow range of activities. This makes intuitive sense when you think about it. If a couple only ever engages in one or two types of sexual activity, they're limiting their opportunities for pleasure, connection, and discovery. They're also creating potential for boredom and routine to erode the passion that brought them together. By contrast, couples who maintain curiosity about each other's bodies and preferences, who are willing to try new things and explore together, keep their intimate lives dynamic and engaging across the lifespan of their relationship. Mutual self-pleasure expands this repertoire in a unique way because it's not about adding complexity or learning elaborate techniques. It's actually quite simple in execution, yet profound in impact. You're not trying to master new positions or remember complicated sequences. You're simply being present with each other in a moment of pleasure, offering the gift of witness and acceptance. This simplicity makes it accessible to couples at any stage of life or physical ability, removing many of the barriers that can make other forms of sexual exploration feel intimidating or impractical. The research also points to how this practice facilitates better communication, which then creates a positive feedback loop, benefiting the entire relationship. When you've shared the vulnerability of self-pleasure with your partner, when you've watched and learned and explored together, it becomes easier to talk about desires and preferences in other contexts as well. The walls of shame and embarrassment come down bit by bit. You realize that honest communication about intimacy doesn't destroy the mystery or romance. It actually enhances both by ensuring that you're truly connecting rather than just going through motions based on assumptions about what the other person wants. This improved communication doesn't stay confined to the bedroom either. Couples who can talk openly about sex often find they can talk more openly about everything, from finances to family conflicts to dreams and fears they might have hidden before. Now, it's important to acknowledge the limitations in our current understanding of this topic. Most research participants in these studies have been young, educated, and from Western cultures, which means we can't assume these findings apply universally across all age groups, education levels, cultural backgrounds, and relationship structures. Different cultures have different norms around sexuality, privacy, and what's considered acceptable between partners. Different generations were raised with different messages about pleasure, self-touch, and the purpose of sexual intimacy. These factors undoubtedly influence how people experience and respond to mutual self-pleasure. However, what remains consistent across every group that has been studied is that mutual exploration tends to improve both satisfaction and connection when both partners are willing and comfortable participants. The specific form this exploration takes might vary. The frequency might differ. The context and meaning might shift across culture. For many couples, incorporating this form of intimacy creates exactly the positive cycle that relationship researchers talk about when they discuss what makes partnerships thrive over time. Better communication leads to more satisfying intimate experiences, which creates more emotional closeness, which makes communication even easier and more honest, which leads to even better intimacy, and so on in an upward spiral of connection and satisfaction. This cycle stands in stark contrast to the negative spiral that many long-term couples fall into, where poor communication leads to unsatisfying intimacy, which creates emotional distance, which makes communication even harder, which further degrades the quality of intimate connection until both partners feel disconnected and unhappy, but don't know how to break the pattern. The beauty of mutual self-pleasure as a tool for breaking negative patterns or preventing them in the first place is that it removes performance pressure from the equation. So many people, particularly men, experience anxiety around sexual performance, worrying about whether they can maintain an erection, whether they'll climax too quickly or take too long, whether their partner is truly satisfied or just pretending. This anxiety creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where the worry itself interferes with arousal and pleasure, making the feared outcome more likely. Women face their own performance pressures, worrying about whether their bodies look attractive, whether they're responding the right way, whether they're taking too long to reach orgasm, or disappointing their partner. When intimacy becomes focused on mutual self-pleasure instead of, or in addition to partnered activities, these performance pressures diminish dramatically. You're not responsible for giving your partner an orgasm through your technique. This shift in dynamic can be incredibly liberating for both partners, creating space for authentic pleasure rather than performative sexuality. It allows you to experiment with what feels good without fear of disappointing someone else if your body doesn't respond exactly as expected on a given day. It acknowledges the reality that our bodies and minds don't always cooperate with our desires, that arousal and pleasure are influenced by stress, fatigue, hormones, mood, and countless other factors that vary from day to day and moment to moment. When you're not locked into rigid expectations about how intimacy should unfold, you're free to be present with whatever experience is actually happening, rather than judging yourself or your partner against some imagined ideal. The practice also addresses another common relationship challenge: the fact that partners often have different arousal patterns, preferences, and timelines. One person might need slow, gentle build-up, while the other prefers more direct stimulation from the start. One might be ready for intimacy quickly, while the other needs more time and foreplay. These differences can create frustration and misunderstanding when couples assume they should naturally be in sync without effort. Mutual self-pleasure accommodates these differences beautifully because each person can move at their own pace, while still being intimately connected with their partner. You can both be fully engaged in a shared experience, while honoring your individual bodies and what they need in that moment. This flexibility becomes particularly valuable as relationships mature and life circumstances change, as careers become more demanding, as children arrive and disrupt sleep schedules, as bodies age and respond differently than they once did. Perhaps most importantly, incorporating mutual self-pleasure into your intimate life sends a powerful message about autonomy and ownership of your own pleasure. It challenges the cultural script that says intimacy is something one person does to or for another person, replacing it with a more balanced view where both partners are active participants in creating pleasure together. This shift has implications beyond the bedroom because it reflects a broader relationship dynamic where both people maintain their individual identities and autonomy while choosing to share their lives together. It moves away from codependency and loss of self that can happen in relationships where boundaries become blurred, toward a healthier interdependence where two whole people come together to create something greater than the sum of their parts. For couples who have never discussed or tried this form of intimacy, the prospect might feel intimidating at first. You might worry about how to bring it up, whether your partner will think you're strange for suggesting it, whether the reality will match the fantasy you might have about it. These concerns are natural and valid. The key is approaching the conversation with curiosity rather than demand, with openness to your partner's feelings and boundaries, rather than insistence on your own agenda. You might start by sharing what you've learned about the benefits of mutual exploration, talking about how you'd like to deepen your connection and understand each other's pleasure more fully. You might suggest starting small, perhaps by simply being more vocal about what feels good during partnered intimacy, or by leaving the lights on when you might have previously kept them off, gradually building toward more explicit sharing as comfort increases. The goal isn't to force yourself or your partner into something that doesn't feel right. The goal is to open a conversation about what might enhance your shared intimacy, to explore whether this form of connection appeals to both of you, to create space for vulnerability and discovery without pressure or expectation. Some couples will embrace this enthusiastically and find it becomes a regular part of their intimate repertoire. Others might try it once and decide it's not for them, which is perfectly fine as long as both partners have had the opportunity to share their honest feelings about it. Still others might incorporate it occasionally as one option among many, bringing it into their intimate lives when the mood and moment feel right without making it a mandatory part of every encounter. What matters most isn't whether you specifically incorporate mutual self-pleasure into your relationship. What matters is the underlying principles that make this practice beneficial. The willingness to be vulnerable with each other, the commitment to learning about each other's pleasure, the ability to communicate openly about desires and boundaries, the flexibility to try new things without shame, the understanding that great intimacy isn't about performance, but about presence and connection. These principles can be applied in countless ways, across all aspects of your relationship, creating the foundation for satisfaction and closeness that endures across the years and challenges that every long-term partnership faces. The research showing benefits of mutual self-pleasure is really pointing towards something larger. The crucial importance of couples maintaining curiosity about each other, investing in their intimate connection, and treating their sexual relationship as a living, evolving aspect of their partnership, rather than something static that should just work automatically without attention or effort. Too many relationships suffer from what researchers call sexual habituation, the gradual decline in arousal and satisfaction that happens when intimacy becomes routine and predictable. Breaking this pattern requires intentionality, creativity, and willingness to step outside comfort zones together, to take small risks in the safety of your relationship, to keep discovering new dimensions of each other, even after you think you know everything there is to know. Great intimacy isn't just about what happens in bed or what specific activities you engage in together. It's about understanding each other at the deepest level, communicating honestly, even when it's uncomfortable, building trust through thousands of small acts of vulnerability and acceptance over time, and choosing each day to prioritize your connection, even when life gets busy and stressful and pulls you in different directions. Mutual self-pleasure can be one tool among many for achieving this deeper connection, but only if both partners approach it with openness, respect for boundaries, and genuine care for each other's comfort and satisfaction above their own agendas or expectations.